These days, work is in trouble. We've outsourced most of our manufacturing to other countries, and with that, we sent away good jobs and our capability to make things. American Giant is a clothing company that's pushing back against this tide. They make all kinds of high-quality clothing and activewear, like sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more, right here in the USA. So when you buy American Giant, you create jobs in towns and cities across the country. And jobs bring pride, purpose. They stitch people together. If all that sounds good to you, visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com with promo code STAPLE20.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan Mayer.
But what's more impressive to me about the
Chase
fact
Thornton.
Yeah, I mean, I got it.
Chris Dowhouse.
Get him, Chase. Get him, Chase.
And Adam
No,
LaRue.
not necessarily, but it's again the same as...
Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
Well, welcome to the show. I'm not sure if we have all our people here. Dan's having a little technical difficulties. Chase, Adam, you joining me today. We want to talk about what we're talking about for today's show, guys.
We're talking about the NFC East. If we get Dan back from Love Connection land, there, he's kind of frozen like the second date on the rundown there. But yeah, we're gonna end up talking about the NFC East today. We covered the AFC East on Sunday. Today we're moving to the NFC side of things here. We lose Dan. We'll probably get Dan back. He's pretty good about navigating that kind of stuff. But in the meantime, hey, welcome into Operation Domination. I am Chase Thornton coming to you from the Mott and Bailey Basement Bar, and we've got Adam LaRue there. We got Chris there. Chris starting us off there. How are we doing, good boys?
I look like I'm in a basement right now, Chase. I'm sitting here in the dark. I was trying to get some light before we came on the show, but at least I'm live. Adam was about people dying on this show, so at least I'm alive, Adam, and I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, well, that's pretty great.
Oh, two of us, three of us.
Oh, and we've come back.
Kind of three of us. Excellent.
we're start. I don't know where Chris went. He got lost in the ether.
We're not sure where any of us went here, but
Can
I know we're going to be. Yeah, well, we can hear you. You're cut up. You're choppy there, Dan, but you're with us here. Well, you were.
All right. We'll try to get this going. Okay, so obviously, we're a wonderful start here on the Operation Domination Star Fantasy Football Advice Network. It's preseason okay for the season drops. Don't you guys worry.
Yeah, I don't think it's...
we were supposed to have. Maybe we're supposed to have Anthony Cervino on. Unfortunately, we had a last second rescheduling that we're going to have to do with him. We will get him on at some point. So apologize for that. That was the plan this week. We are still going to do the NFC East team profile though, and get through it with hopefully no further issues. One last sound check, gentlemen. Are we good?
We're good right now. We're good currently.
Hearing you now. Yep.
Okay. Just want to double check before we move any further. So yeah, I'm your host Dan Mayer, Jake Ferguson, and Adam. We
have fallen back.
And so here's what we're gonna do. Quarterbacks that we want to talk about the NFC profile to kick it off right. The first guy we want to talk about is Jalen Hurts. Adam, if you hear me, let's swing this to you. Hopefully,
I heard Adam. So
Yeah.
Adam, we'll start off with you, buddy.
All right, so are we talking about, I'm going to assume, Jalen Hurts. So I think the big thing is what does the tush push look like, right? Because that's where the bulk of the points from Jalen Hurts have kind of been coming from. The whole either the tush push or before that when they were prolific at the QB sneak regardless. But is that interior push going to be quite the same? I think it probably will be. But I do think that is the question when you're valuing him, because I mean, realistically, you're kind of expecting the rushing touchdowns to carry the load, unless you think he's going to suddenly break, past, into the 30+ touchdown territory, which I don't personally expect. So it's whether or not, the rushing touchdowns are going to continue to be put out at a prolific pace. Again, I think he's got the physicality to do it. Maybe it'll be look different in how that's being achieved. What's scary about him is Saquon Barkley coming in and that potentially being a bigger part of the red zone offense. But ultimately, I think just him being such a weapon, changing the math on the goal line. I have him at QB3. Chris, I know you're at QB2. Dan at QB2. Chase at QB3. We're all right there. I personally have that top 3 in a tier. I don't know if you guys, kind of do as well. But I think those guys are, kind of similar, like being dominant QB1s. But to me, at least, of the top 3, I think he does have the most questions. But I'm still making that bet regardless, because if he is as prolific in the end zone as he's been, then, I mean, he's going to be fantastic for fantasy.
Well, and the nice thing about Hurts right now is, even if he's not as prolific, the guy had 15 rushing touchdowns last season. And like you mentioned, the tush push may be a thing of the past, or at least the tush push as we knew it. But it's not like 15 touchdowns was a crazy out of character thing for him, to do. Sure. And even if he does, say he hits half of that, say he gets 8 rushing touchdowns this season, loses 40 some points, he's still a top 5 type scoring quarterback based on, points from last season. If you take 40 points away from what he did last season, 6.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think the question is whether or not he's a QB1 or something terrible would need to happen for that. It's just whether or not, he maintains, the value we're looking at. Because again, we all have him in the top 3, give or take.
This is like survival of the fittest here on this show. But I'm with you, Adam and Chase. Look, here's my difference, Adam, that I'm not maybe as worried about. Tush push gets a lot of credit for Jalen Hurts' touchdowns, but we all look back his freshman, sophomore year, and junior year in college. This guy's a run first quarterback. He's always been built kind of like a linebacker. He's always had the mentality to kind of run the ball. Doesn't get hurt a lot. And the Eagle offense shouldn't be nearly as pathetic as it was towards the end of the season last year. So add all those different things. From what I'm understanding in camp, you're seeing a lot more motion. You're seeing a lot more bunch formations. You're actually going to see Jalen Hurts have opportunity to kind of be utilized different way than just being the obvious situation. So I have a little more hope for him. And while I have a little concerned about Josh Allen, continuing that consistency, we talked about that last show, 15 touchdown rushes for Josh Allen is a little more out of character than it is for Jalen Hurts. So I think we're all in agreement. He's definitely a top 3 guy, but a guy that, maybe that we're kind of, nitpicking a little bit here or there, depending on what our preferences are. You guys want to move on to the next quarterback position we're looking at, and how about them Cowboys? Casey, when it's hard with them Cowboys, where do you got Dak Prescott on your board right now?
Right, yeah, Dak Prescott, last year's quarterback 3 overall, had a great year, phenomenal year. We were talking about him in the MVP conversation here, and again, we don't know. I don't think we all.
Oh, hello! It is just me now. Dak Prescott is who we're talking about. Chase, back to you.
Now, Chris has him ranked highest of all 4 of us at 6. Adam, you and I have him at 7. Dan has him all the way down at 9. Now, Chris, what's your thoughts here on Dak Prescott? Why do you have him at 6? You're actually highest of the 4 of us here. What's your thoughts on Dak Prescott there, and why do you have him at 6?
Yeah, I have him a little bit higher than you guys do. But look, Dak Prescott was one of the best quarterbacks. This is an MVP candidate last year. I know that we all remember the Green Bay game, and we kind of hold that against him. But he still put up a lot of yards in that Green Bay game if we kind of forget about that part. So then for fantasy, it's not about what your team does necessarily win and loss wise. It's about how many points they put up. And we saw Dak Prescott get into his zone last year with McCarthy as head coach and offensive coordinator. We saw him kind of, get in a rhythm with CeeDee Lamb. As long as these guys don't miss time, in my opinion, there's no injury bugs. They have a lot to both prove. Dak Prescott was one of the more consistent guys you could have your lineup week in, week out. So for me, as a guy that we're all down on the Cowboys, kind of what happened this offseason. But let's not forget, they didn't lose anybody offensively, and they have another year in this system, another more comfortable, understanding what they want to be. And Dak Prescott, while the offensive line's got some concerns, I think what they did in the draft's going to kind of benefit them long term and probably short term as well. So I think Dak Prescott's a guy that is going to be a guy you like to have. And if he scrambles a little bit, Chase, then you're maybe have even a top 5 option.
Here's the thing. We were talking about what a phenomenal year he was having, and he did. But honestly, it wasn't and I'll refer to this later when I talk about CeeDee Lamb when we get to the wide receivers, but it wasn't a wildly out of character year for Dak passing the football. Outside of his completion percentage and his passer rating, he didn't set any career highs last season. It was just, he had a good year, but it was kind of just a Dak year, and things fell together. He was pretty efficient, but when you look at all things considered, like I said, it wasn't like it was this crazy out of character year. And I think that there are going to be other circumstances. I think that you can lock him in as a QB1 this year. I don't know that he necessarily makes it back to QB3, but I think he's a locked in quarterback 1 here. So I don't think we're arguing that too much, but we're going to move on to Jayden Daniels. And this is a guy that we do have some beef with each other on.
If we had Dan for the soundbite, this would be a Chase v. Chris right now.
This would be a showdown right here between you and me, Chris. Here now, Chris, you've got him ranked all the way up at number 8. You're highest out of all 4 of us on this one. Dan's got him at 11. Adam's got him at 13. I have him down at 18. Okay, now I'm curious to know why you have him all the way up at 8, or what your argument is for all the way up at 8. Then I'll tell you why I've got him at 18. And
as
Adam,
an outside spectator, I just got to say, for this to be the way this goes, because I think in the pre-draft process, this is probably reversed.
right.
In terms of actually liking the player. So anyways, I just had to say that is hilarious to me.
No, well, so let's clarify with some things. Number one, Adam, we're not talking about dynasty, and that was a lot of big we focused on going into the draft was our dynasty perspectives of these quarterbacks. I think Daniels is a guy who I have concerns about being injured, but one thing I don't have concerns about is a guy who is going to have one read, tuck, and run. And that is something he did a lot of last year. And then add the fact that you have Cliff Kingsbury as your offensive coordinator, who's pretty uncreative overall as an offensive coordinator, in my opinion. So what does he kind of do? A lot of shotgun, a lot of spread you out, and a lot of running with his quarterback, especially in the red zone. So Jayden Daniels to me is a guy who has a great, cheat code when it comes into fantasy football, especially when it comes to redraft leagues. A guy I'm not worried about the long term. And then the other guy on the flip side has some weapons in place. You got Terry McLaurin, you got Jahan Dotson, you got different guys, and you have to score with these teams. Eagles are going to score points. Dallas is going to score points. So Washington's going to have some games where they're going to have to put up some points on the board, put all the things together. Jayden Daniels is a guy who's a rookie, one read, throws the ball to guys who are open or chucks it and runs. I'm going to go with the guys 9 out of 10 times. That's what we see consistently score out for you to fantasy football. Justin Fields effect.
All right, well, I can't necessarily argue with anything you said there. Like, I'm not down on Jayden Daniels as a player long term. I'm just not overly excited about taking the step to draft him and redraft this season. Okay. Like, we know that rookie quarterbacks can be successful right away. We saw it last season with Stroud. We saw with Justin Herbert was a top 10 quarterback in 2020. Heck, under this same offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury, Kyler Murray was a top 10 quarterback his rookie season in 2019, running this exact same offense. So it's not like it can't be done, right? But I'm just not overly confident, like I said, in redraft compared to the guys that I have ranked around him. Washington has a middle of the road quarterback strength of schedule this season. So, he's not going to be like overly taxed in terms of the defenses he's facing. He's not running a complete gauntlet. But honestly, I'm not far off of consensus on this. Coming into today, his ECR was 16 and ADP had him at 17. So me having him at 18, I'm a little lower than consensus, but not crazy out of left field on it. I will say that you mentioned it's not about dynasty, and you joked, Adam, that hey, in the pre-draft process, we were probably reversed. I probably like Jayden Daniels more than Chris did. I'm taking him at 1-3 in my dynasty superflex drafts, and I am loving it all day long. And I have no problem with that. And in best ball, especially if I can get him as a number 2, I'm all over that, because I think that he is going to be able to have, because of his rushing upside, those spike weeks. But I think that you got to look at, like Murray being a top 10 quarterback in this offense. He was already familiar with Cliff Kingsbury. Kingsbury knew what he had coming in there. They knew each other. They were comfortable with each other. They knew the offense.
Offense isn't complicated, though. That's my whole point, Chase. Offense isn't complicated at all.
It's not, but he's still new to the NFL, and I'm not sure that he's as NFL ready as, say, Caleb Williams. I think Caleb Williams was the only actual NFL ready guy that got drafted this season. I'm a little bit leery of taking him higher than where I've got him ranked. I mean, I've got him ranked around guys like, I've got Rodgers and Herbert right in front of him. I've got Lawrence right in front of him at 15. I do have Daniels ranked higher than Stafford. I've got him ranked higher than Watson. I've got him ranked higher than a couple other guys that I think could have good years if things fall right for him, but I'm not super confident in him.
My question real quick, we'll move on from this, but Adam, I'd love you to jump on your kind of point perspective, because you're kind of middle between the two of us. To me, I'm looking at a guy who we saw a couple of years ago. Daniel Jones was top 6 quarterback fantasy football wise, and doesn't have nearly explosiveness that Jayden Daniels has better weapons in place than he does. So I expect more than 15 touchdown passes, for example. So that's why I'm looking at a guy. The legs are a huge part in my book, Chase. I love all the guys you just named, but there's a billion good different quarterbacks. Jared Goff. There's a lot of quarterbacks who could throw the ball around and get you 200 yards, 300 yards. You're going to need those 2-3 touchdowns, but there's very few guys just get you 60 yards rushing, and that's money in the bank for you week in, week out, plus a rushing touchdown here or there. That's huge. So that's why I have him so high, because I think the upside and the rushing thing is just, even Justin Fields, who struggled, quote unquote, last year, was fantastic as long as he was healthy.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I am in the exact middle between you guys at 13, between 8 and 18. So for me, I think it does come down to, and I'm so excited to say this because I didn't get to say it at all last week, but it is a process kind of decision here. So I have him at 13 because, to me, kind of, Chase, to your point, he is outside of what I am comfortable taking as, like, okay, in redraft, this is my QB1. Like, I'm comfortable with this, and the board falls the way it falls after that. Like, I'm not doing that. But if I'm waiting on quarterback and we're just getting towards the end and I'm just going to take like 2 and gamble, I think he's like the most fun to do it with, because that rushing quarterback upside to me is like, that's where I'm swinging for a homer with someone late. So I'm going to err towards Chris's side, but I do agree with you in the sense that I'm not like locking him in as a QB1 and being like, I'm comfortable with this. But, if at the end of the draft we're getting into the, mid to late teens, I can stack him and Aaron Rodgers and be like, all right, I have like my fail safe. I have, my home run option. Let's just see what happens. Like, I feel really comfortable doing that. And I feel pretty confident that, like, I'm gambling on one of these guys that got it less than a QB1 value will probably make their way up there.
Yeah, no, I think best ball all day long. Like I said, I'm loving him in Dynasty. I want to see it for a year before I'm ready to take that step in redraft, especially at quarterback position where I know I can find points up and down the board there. I don't have to jump on him. That's my take on it there.
Well, and I think I appreciate Adam kind of clarifying too. One of the things that I'm a little bit different on most people is if I don't have a guy, even if I do have, Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, for example, I always take 2 quarterbacks. I always want to have I think value of quarterbacks is extremely important. But if I'm going to take a Jayden Daniels, I'm definitely going to look to have a better backup, quote unquote, where I'm looking at like an Aaron Rodgers or a Jared Goff, a guy who I can always pair up with a thrower that you guys are talking about that I can kind of trust, or even upside guy like Trevor Lawrence, for example. But I like having the upside of those legs, and that usually a few guys, in this is available to us when we draft. Anthony Richardson is a guy who's high on a lot of people. I'm not as high on him, but a big part why he's so high is because that rushing potential. But moving on to the next quarterback position, do we even care about the Giants quarterback situation this year?
I care about it insofar as it's a quarterback. So if you depending on how deep your dynasty league or your superflex league, 2-quarterback league is, Daniel Jones, like you mentioned, we've seen him put together a top 10 season with his rushing potential coming off injury like that, coming off a terrible year, I don't know if we
real quick, Chase. I'm gonna jump in. So let's give kind of you to your perspectives. Your guys are specialists in a sense. Chase, give me a best ball perspective of Daniel Jones. Does he have any value? And then Adam, talking about Superflex Dynasty. Does he have any value this year? What kind of value do you think? So Chase, we'll start with you. Where do we see Daniel Jones as a best ball option?
I was really in on him last year for best ball because of his rushing upside and because of, like Adam had kind of mentioned here when we talked about Jayden Daniels, that home run potential. I'm going to have to see it to believe it. I might be willing to take him if you want to do a 3-quarterback build in, say, an underdog. If you take him as your 3, that's where I have him ranked. I have him 26 right now overall. I haven't done my statistical projections yet, but based on my initial rankings here, I have him down at 26. I have him as a QB 3. He definitely has rushing talent. He's got better options around him, but we thought they added talent around him last year, and we saw how that worked. So minimal value this. I will not have near the shares of him this year in best ball that I did last year.
Similarly, I have him at QB 25 as far as redraft is concerned, and then as far as dynasty, like I do not think that he is going to be an NFL starter 2 years from now. I don't really think he's going to be one next year, but I wouldn't be that shocked if he ended up with the job. But ultimately, like, he is not someone. I think his short-term value is greater than his long-term value. Is I guess the point I'm trying to make.
So Adam, for that point, am I going to dump Daniel Jones, or am I going to try to ride him out as if I'm a super flex league and I have him on my roster? Should I just kind of keep him as a quarterback option this year?
It depends. Like if there's someone who, like a Giants fan or someone who weirdly does still believe in him, then by all means try to get out. But otherwise, like, I think you're gonna have a really hard time moving him in a super flex. Like, would I want him to be my QB2? Absolutely not. But hey, if at the cost of, I think his value is somewhere like a late third right now. It's not like he's a particularly expensive guy. So for that to be my injury insurance and my bye week guy, I think there are worse options in that sense that, hey, he's been a QB1 before. Like, you can get those good weeks, especially, if it happens that your quarterback's bye lines up when they're playing a really bad defense, because we have seen him feast on, bad defenses in the past. He's never been someone to particularly do anything against the good ones, but can beat up on a bad one.
Yeah, he's not a guy I'll be drafting, but he'll be a guy I'll be monitoring coming into the bye weeks later in the season, like you said, and looking for those matchups there and seeing if I can maybe catch lightning in a bottle for a week or two there. All right, moving on to running backs here.
I think we have Dan back. Dan, do we have you back?
We kind of have Dan back. We'll see. We can see him. You look good, Dan, as always.
I'm afraid to sneeze.
Oh.
Thanks. Can you guys hear me at all?
We hear you.
Yes.
We see you and hear you. We're moving on.
I can tell I'm still on a delay.
You are still on a delay, but we can hear you eventually.
All right, go ahead, Chase. Keep rolling it to the running backs. You guys got to move on.
It's Adam's turn anyway. Here we're going to move on to the running backs, and right now I think the top ranked running back in the whole East, as it has been for several years here, Saquon Barkley. Right now we've all kind of got him lumped around 4, 5, 6. There, Adam, you've got him at running back 4. What's got you so excited about Saquon Barkley heading into this season here now that he's signed with the Eagles?
Yeah, this is like by far the best offensive line he's been with in his career. And he's been such a home run threat that, this past year wasn't necessarily able to get to that gear that often because there were guys hitting him behind the line of scrimmage so dang often. But I'm just really excited to see him with a good offensive line, especially, I think it was Chris, to your point earlier, if this is a team that's using a lot of motion, doing some interesting things on offense, then he could have a really efficient year on the ground. And then I think the threat of Jalen Hurts in the red zone, I just talked about how Saquon can kind of hurt Jalen Hurts, but on the flip side, I think Jalen Hurts in a sense helps Saquon because people are going to be worried about you get in the red zone. They're like, all right, we know that they want Jalen Hurts to get the rushing touchdown here. So I think on most teams, the focus is like, all right, you're on like 2nd and goal at the 3. The focus is on the running back. The focus on the Eagles is going to be on Jalen Hurts. So you're going to be able to get some sneaky touchdowns out of him. And then, if he doesn't get that many of those, maybe the primary option in the red zone is still Jalen Hurts. That's fine because he's someone that I've seen consistently make those deep runs and score that way. This isn't a James Cook situation where I'm like, all right, it's great. You get 10 plus yard runs all the time, but like you get to 15 yards and it's wraps every single time. Like where James Cook, I believe, was like second in the league in 10 plus yard runs, but falls off a cliff once you break 20. Like that's not the case with Saquon. He can actually get those deep touchdowns. So I'm really excited with this pairing. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and this is a team that last season here, I mean, they gave between Swift and Gainwell, they gave them almost 90 they gave him almost 90 targets between the two of them. If you can give Saquon 60, 65, 70 of those targets, Katie bar the door. It's going to be a hell of a year for Saquon there in Philadelphia. Now, looking a little farther down the East Coast there, Austin Ekeler, Brian Robinson. Put it out there. Chris, we'll start with you. Who's the more valuable fantasy back this season between Austin Ekeler and Brian Robinson? It was kind of a surprise that they signed Ekeler there in Washington. Who's the more valuable fantasy back of the two, and where do you have him as a general fantasy range, the guy who wins this debate?
Yeah, that's tough for me, Chase. I mean, I think both these guys are going to have value throughout the season. I think the value is going to be kind of, flip-flop through the season and, depending on the matchups in a lot of ways. I think Robinson's got the early down potential. The guys you're going to see the early down back, early first down, second down, kind of the hammer used in the red zone. But we know Austin Ekeler, when he's healthy, quote unquote, and I don't think he was healthy at all the entire last year, looked like a shell of himself. But if he has any more juice, quote unquote, left, it doesn't have to be too much. We saw, Kingsbury used to like Kenyon Drake. We've seen him use different running backs to rotate them in. James Conner got his resurgence back with him. There's a lot of things that Austin Ekeler does that usually, Kingsbury likes. He's a guy who you can kind of utilize in the passing attack. We saw Chase Edmonds utilize in that role. We've seen K Drake be guy who get featured back as a red zone guy. So I think you're going to see Austin Ekeler be the overall more valuable guy, quote unquote. Brian Robinson might have better stats for the whole season overall, but I think Eckler's the guy who I like, especially with we talked about in this show, half-point PPR, just because I think you're going to see a lot of nose to the running back. You're going to see a lot of easy things for Jayden Daniels to kind of do one or two reads to kind of throw it to the receiver, running back, or run. So I think Austin Ekeler is the guy I prefer in this situation.
It's kind of funny. It's a really close, battle, if you want to put it that way right now. Austin Eckler's ECR, the experts have him ranked at 34, but he's being drafted at running back 26. It's the exact opposite for Brian Robinson. The experts have him ranked at 28, but people are taking him as running back 35. I tend to agree with the side that says Brian Robinson will be the more effective and more valuable running back by the end of the season. I think based on what we saw from these guys on the field last season, it was by far Austin Eckler's worst and least efficient season. Just didn't look like the same guy that we'd seen earlier in his career. Now there's, you can argue about the offense under Kellen Moore and the offensive line and the fact that every single receiver they had was hurt. So what was everybody going to key on in the first place and everything else? But just based on what we saw, the efficiency metrics for Brian Robinson looked better. He's younger. Again, I said it kind of last week. I'll bet on a younger guy before I bet on a guy who could have graduated with me. I tend to lean towards Brian Robinson. Adam, you got anything to add? You want to stick in there?
Just really briefly, I love pairing like your super fast mobile quarterbacks with power backs. Like that is such a awesome pairing to me. So that's the combination that I think makes the most sense, in my mind. Like Eckler's strength is as a receiving back. I don't necessarily know that Jayden Daniels is going to be the check down type, kind of to our point earlier. I think he's going to be my first read down the field and I'm going to run. Like, I don't know if I think he's going to run. I don't think he's checking down to guys, maybe as often as we would like. So that's kind of my thought. What I will give you, Chris, and then go ahead. I would be interested to see if Ekeler is the guy that gets the red zone touches instead of Brian Robinson. Right. Just being that small guy who has been super effective around the red zone, which could push Ekeler ahead. So I will throw that out there as a possibility. I just, my bias is definitely towards having that power back with, the Mark Ingram, Lamar Jackson, the Alfred Morris, RG3, like that type of pairing is where my bias lies personally.
Red zone usage could really skew that whole argument. You're right there.
I just want to make real quick about Jayden Daniels. I'm a huge fan, but Jayden Daniels isn't one of these guys who can just throw the bomb and can't check the ball down. He is pretty accurate as the guys out of the backfield. So that's one of the things I will give him credit for. He can actually make the throws out of the backfield and check it down.
He's much more a passer who can run. He's much more a passer who can run. He's not necessarily a runner who just happens to throw it every once in a while when somebody's wide ass open. No, you're right. All right, moving on here. Devin Singletary, speaking on faces in new places here. Devin Singletary comes from Houston and signs with the New York Giants. Guys, what are our takes on this? Now, I've got him ranked down around number 30 there. I'm not super excited about him because I think that we know what we're getting with Devin Singletary. I mean, he's being drafted at running back 34 overall, but he is technically at the moment, he's a starting running back. He's one of the 32 starting running backs in the league here. He was running back 32 overall last year, but keep in mind, he didn't take over really until about a third of the way or more through the year. Dameon Pierce started out as the lead back in that backfield. And then it was about 8 weeks in or so, that 7-8 weeks in, that they really started giving the ball to Singletary, that he took over that backfield and then he kind of didn't let it go there. I've always kind of felt about Devin Singletary that he has running back 2 talent, but he's kind of always been stuck in an RB3 situation. He doesn't excite anybody, but he just kind of continually puts up points whenever he's asked to and whatever he's called upon. He's definitely got an offensive line downgrade moving from Houston to New York, but New York's line is a downgrade from any situation. He's got a quarterback downgrade coming from Stroud to Daniel Jones, as we talked about earlier. You've got Tyrone Tracy, who's kind of lurking there. I'm not worried about Eric Gray at all. I think that we know what Eric Gray is at this point in his career, and he's good enough to be on a roster, but not necessarily good enough to threaten anybody's job. I think that unless Singletary gets hurt, this is his job all season, and then we'll see what we've got in Tyrone Tracy. But anybody else have any thoughts on Devin Singletary here? Or, where do you guys see him shaking out here as we enter draft season here?
I don't even jump in on that one because I'm not a big Singletary fan. Yes, there's Dan. There's Dan. Yes.
If Dan wants to talk about Devin Singletary, go for it, dude.
All right. My call enough. Participate. Yeah. So I just want Devin Singletary is one of those guys who kind of falls in a tweener situation here, where on one hand it's kind of like the Zeke effect.
There's wisdom right there being sprinkled.
Like he might be paired up for a ton of volume. 5'7", 2. All right, well, never mind. See you guys. Do you?
Okay. Well, no. I think his point, though, the point that he was making, though, he is set up for a ton of volume in terms of he's going to be the number. Like we said, he's the number one in that offense. But he's not in. It's not a great situation for a running back because it's
not a ton of volume, Chase. Because look, I don't cut you off, but Saquon Barkley was the running back there last 2 years. And was disappointing for that offense. He averaged like 3.8 yards per carry last year. So I think one of the things I would be concerned about I think Singletary is a nice guy to have on your roster. It's not a guy I think we'll all agree with is the Goedert and it's like target, but is a guy is a nice option to have, as especially redraft leagues. But he's not a guy I think we're going to look forward to, have huge numbers this year in an offense that doesn't really feature the running back.
Yeah, no, he's on an offense that we don't expect to be playing from ahead very often, and it's not a great situation, regardless of the fact that he does hold that top spot on the depth chart right now, and I expect him to hold that top spot on the depth chart here going forward here. Adam, if we've still got you, there you go. Adam, let's talk about Ezekiel Elliott and what the hell is going on at the running back situation down in Jerry World there. Supposedly they're all in. Okay, but then they enter the draft and they exit the draft and they didn't do a damn thing to address the running back situation. So they're going to go. They bring back Zeke, Jerry Jones's favorite, son from another mother kind of thing, and they're going to go into the season with Ezekiel Elliott and Rico Dowdle atop their depth chart here. Now, Adam, you've got him ranked way down at running back 39. Chris, you have him ranked highest of all four of us up at running back 25. Chris, let's start with you. What has you excited about Ezekiel Elliott? Why do you have him? As we're all gone. Okay, well, hey, there we go. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, so I think you were breaking off with Ezekiel Elliott, and I came back just in time. I'm more high on Zeke than I think most people are just in general. And Chase, you talked about the Cowboys not doing anything for the running back position in the draft. I think the opposite in a sense. They drafted 2 linemen who are pretty damn good, I think, especially Cooper Beebe, who's a guy who I think is a stud. When you have the interior line that Dallas is putting together, you have a tackle who's still raw, but did a pretty good job run blocking last year in Oklahoma. I think there's a lot of talent in the front line. Talk about Dak Prescott being a guy who was MVP candidate last year. CeeDee Lamb, the best receivers you could have in the game. and then you add Zeke. Look, I don't think Zeke has what he had in the past. I'm not trying to make that argument, so don't get it twisted. But we watched Tony Pollard be wildly inefficient last year and get a hell of a lot of touches, including inside that 5-yard line, which he just did not convert and wound up having, I think, 6 or 7 total touchdowns. What I'm looking for is, I think there's going to be committee. Yes, Rico Dowdle will be involved a little bit. We've seen Brian Schottenheimer use committees before. He's used it in New York. He was in the Jets. That year he had LT, who's had a similar situation to Zeke was, where LT was towards the end of his career. It wasn't the same explosiveness, coming off like 3.3 yards per carry season previous in the Chargers. Gets to the New York Jets. So he's rotating with Sean Green, some other backs. Thomas Jones was utilized, and LT was the veteran, quote unquote, of the guys, and got most of the carry. Got 950 yards rushing, 6 rushing touchdowns, had over 40 yards catching. So I say all that because I think Zeke is a guy who can still catch the ball. We saw that in New England last year. Is a guy who's still going to be pretty good in the red zone. And I think that we think if Dallas Points going to move the ball, like we expect him to be able to, he's going to get a lot of opportunities to kind of fall into that red zone and fall into that end zone, scoring some cheap touchdowns. So an 8 to 10 touchdown, season out of Zeke between catching the ball and running the ball, I think is out of the question at all. And I think we look at the guys last year, like a Gus Edwards, like Pollard. Those are guys who both finished in top 25 guys. So why can't Zeke do the same thing?
Okay, Adam, I am, again, it's funny, I am literally dead ass in the middle of you guys. Adam has him ranked, as Zeke ranked at 39. Chris has him at 25. If you go 7 points in either direction, there am I at 32 on him. So Adam, give us your take on why Ezekiel Elliott is not going to be a high running back 3, low end running back 2.
Yeah. So for me, I like to gamble not on the older running backs, kind of like you were saying. And we've had a couple years in a row now where the rushing efficiency just hasn't been there. Not to say that he's completely washed, not to say that he doesn't have a role to play in the NFL, but he does. But kind of to Dan's point, what he just mentioned, in that comment, I think his role is he's going to come in. He's the safe pass blocker. He's someone who, you can have around the red zone. And I think, can do some things there and might fall into the end zone. And if that's the case, he might have a ton of value. But I think it boils down to the defense, how much value they're going to have. And I think getting, Diggs back, I think this is going to be, kind of back to that 22 level where the offense can kind of take the back seat just a little bit and let the defense win games. Because we've seen in Mike McCarthy's past, the defense is cooking. He's just going to lay off. Like, he's not the guy that's like, I'm just going to beat you by 60. He's all right, well, the defense has us up 24. We're just going to, grind the game out until you show us you can score on our defense. So if that ends up being the case, to me, I think the back that is going to be more efficient running the ball is Dowdle. I thought, to me, most of the season last year, I thought Dowdle looked better with the ball in his hands than Pollard did. I mean, for a good chunk of the season. And that's not to say that he's an outright better player. I think that had more to do with Pollard's injury and probably getting overworked. I'm not, whatever. I'm not some big Dowdle stan. But I do think he's going to be the better athlete. I don't think you're going to trust him to pass protect for Dak. But if that's, not really where the value is coming from, if it's all right, like we're up, go rush 15 times, that's great. And then I think the other piece of it for me is that in that same type of situation, when we saw Zeke and Pollard, it was the change of pace back that was the value guy that, was getting fantasy points. And I think that's kind of the situation that Dowdle again is going to kind of come into, where it's Zeke run, Zeke pass protect. Then next, suddenly, we have a fast guy. We have the guy that's not 33 and can actually run a 4.5 still. And he's hitting the edge, and suddenly we're playing to a speed that we haven't been playing for the last, 4 snaps. I just think, to me, that's the gamble I like more. And that's not to say that I have Dowdle much higher than I do Zeke. I don't have either Cowboys back crazy high. But to say, like, if I'm doing a 0 running back build and I'm just gambling on running backs at the end of the draft, just last couple rounds, like, all right, I'm gambling on you. Dowdle's the guy I'm coming away with personally a lot more often than I am Zeke.
All right. I'm going to lean Chris on this one, Adam, and let me tell you why here. You mentioned it kind of yourself, and to Dan's point, Dan flashed a comment up on the screen earlier. He said Zeke's value has to come through that passing game and falling in the end zone. I think he is their short yardage back between the two. I think he's going to have those carries. I think he showed last year he's not a 300 touch per year guy anymore, but he handled a hell of a lot more work last year, I think, than we all thought he would.
184 rushes.
Yeah, being quote unquote the backup to Ramondre Stevenson there. And hey, Tony Pollard in this offense last year saw 67 targets. Ezekiel Elliott up in New England saw 65 targets at this stage in his career. He does not have to come off the field. He may be their short yardage back, but he does not have to come off the field on third down because, like you said, he is a pass blocker, and he is one of the best pass blocking running backs in the league, certainly better than Rico Dowdle. This is a team that is going to have to pass, but when they do run, I think they are going to want to go through Zeke. I honestly have not seen much from Dowdle to this point in his career to make me think that you want to put a ton of faith in him. I think he will be a clear backup in this offense. You seem to think it'll be much more of a committee. If you do think it's much more of a committee, then there's value to be had here in this offense because we know it's going to be a high scoring offense. I tend to lean more with Chris that I think that at least for a year, Zeke is going to get higher usage in this offense. But you make good points about the fact that, he's not a 300 touch per year guy anymore. Dowdle will have a role in this offense. Couple of real quick running back hits here. Let's do quick responses here. Tyrone Tracy, Eric Gray, who's the handcuff you want to Singletary up there in New York? Adam, Tracy, Chris.
Dynasty-wise, Tracy for sure. Redraft, neither, but maybe Gray.
All right, there you go. And then moving on to the backup situation there in Philadelphia, Kenneth Gainwell, Will Shipley. I will take Shipley. Who you guys got? Chris, you first on this one.
I'm going to go with Kenneth Gainwell. I am not a Will Shipley fan. I'll continue to say that. I think this guy's not think special, and I don't think he's still going to get a lot of playing time.
Adam?
I'm not a fan of either of them, but I'm going to go with Gainwell because I do know that Gainwell loves him Sirianni loves him some Gainwell for no reason.
All right, there you have it. Let's look at the wide receiver position now real quick. We don't have to talk about a whole hell of a Dan says Shipley sucks there. We all know Dan loves Will Shipley there. I was a Shipley guy all through the draft process. I stand by that. I think he's got more talent than I think all you guys have given him credit for. We'll have to see it this season. He's going to have to prove it though. There's not a whole hell of a lot that we have to say. I don't think about CeeDee Lamb. Is there? He's the expert consensus number one. He's being drafted as the number one wide receiver. He's got an argument to be the top overall pick in the draft right now. Listen, the guy was number one in targets, receptions, and touchdowns, total touchdowns scored among all wide receivers last season. We all talked about this crazy historical season that Tyreek Hill was having, and he was. But when it was all said and done, Lamb was the guy who scored the most fantasy points last year, over 400 of them, and he only trailed Hill by 50 total yards on the season. Okay? Again, this is a team that's going to have to pass. The O-line, yes, they addressed it in the draft, but I think that in the short term, at least, the O-line is worse. They didn't really address that running back situation. Like I said, I don't think they're as strong at that position as they were last year. This is a team that is still going to have to throw. Dak is playing at the top of his game in this offense right now. I don't see any reason why that takes a step back. Now, there could be some regression from CeeDee because he was wildly efficient last season, caught over almost 75% of the balls thrown his way. But like I said, it wasn't a crazy efficient year for Dak. It was just a regular Dak season last season. We haven't seen a guy repeat as the top wide receiver in fantasy since Antonio Brown in 2016, 2017. I think there's a real chance that CeeDee can do it this season. We all have him ranked in our top two. Moving on. A.J. Brown, again, similar. We've got him all ranked. Dan and Adam both have him ranked at 6. Chris and I both have him ranked at wide receiver 7. I think he's a borderline end of first round type pick. I don't think anybody's arguing that he is a wide receiver 1 on the season. Now, Devonta Smith, a guy who has a lot of talent, but has always kind of slotted in. He's not just a wide receiver 2 on his team. Looks like he can slot in as a wide receiver 2, in fantasy, and has slotted in as a wide receiver 2. Dan's highest on him among us. He's got him at 20. Adam, you've got him at 25. Chris and I are at 24 and 23 on that. So I think we all think that Devonta Smith is a number 2 there. Dan wants to chime in there and say that Lamb could get 200 targets this season. I mean, he had 180 last season. He had 180. I think it was 181. Was it last season? So I mean, he wasn't far off. 181 targets last season in 17 games. You give him one more target per game, and he's knocking on the door of 200 targets. It's crazy. One of the lock bets of the night, Dan says, is that CeeDee Lamb will be higher than 1399.5 receiving yards. So he thinks that he hits 1,400 receiving yards. I'm not inclined to argue with that. Moving on, other wide receivers in this division, Terry McLaurin. There's a little bit of a split here between us. Dan and Chris both have him ranked at 25. Adam, you and I have him at 30 and 31 here. Chris, you got any reason why why you're a little more excited? I thought I was kind of big on Terry McLaurin, honestly, coming into this season, but you seem to be a little more excited. What's got you excited about Terry McLaurin? Where you see him at wide receiver 25 this season?
I think he's really a strong receiver 2 option, a guy that we've seen have horrible, and I mean horrible, quarterback play for most of his career, and still somehow is productive. He doesn't always blow you away with the statistics in the season. He's very consistent. If he gets to decent, like I talked about this before, I'm not as in love with Jayden Daniels as most people are, but I'm not down on Jayden Daniels per se either. And I think this guy can throw the ball to, especially his receiver 1. We've seen Chris Kingsbury do a great job throughout his career of featuring that receiver 1 and making sure statistically, fantasy-wise, they're always usually very relevant and they see tons of targets. So this isn't going to be a defense or an offense, I should say. There's going to be tons of reads. There's going to be a lot of guys who are schemed to primarily run the look for. Some guys who do the option around. Terry McLaurin is good at all those different things. The guy who can catch it underneath, the guy who can stretch the field, and Jayden Daniels can push the ball down the field a little bit. So I think put all those things together, you have a guy who's been borderline stiff in that receiver 2 range, but always kind of a quarterback away. He's got a decent quarterback play, an offensive coordinator who's going to feature that receiver 1, Terry McLaurin, pretty consistently week in, week out.
All right. Yeah. And I mean, we're not all that different on him. You've got him as a say low 2, high 3. I've got him as a mid wide receiver 3 here. He was wide receiver 28 last season. His yards per target, his yards per reception were both the lowest of his career, kind of by far. And honestly, if you look at the history of that wide receiver 1, even with D-Hop under Cliff Kingsbury, I don't think that those numbers for McLaurin are going to raise a whole lot this year in terms of his yards per target, yards per reception. I think he is the unquestioned number 1 receiver on that team. But I think with Scary Terry, by now we know what we're going to get. We're going to get about 220 PPR points. He's going to be a wide receiver 2 or 3 type, like kind of on that line there. And so be it. That's what it's going to be. Now, if Daniels turns out to be a much more efficient or much better passer than in his rookie season, then I think I'm at least giving him credit for. Could he be a mid wide receiver too? Oh yeah. But I don't think we're all that far off on time.
Well, Chase,
what we see coming from McLaurin. Go ahead.
What Dan just kind of put in the chat, you talked about Sam Howell's completion percentage at 32% last year.
Yes.
Jeremy McLaurin having one of the having a 3% number last year. So I think maybe you question Jayden Daniels' ability to throw the ball this year, but you think he's going to be that pathetic? I mean, we're not talking about.
No, I don't think he's going to be
pathetic. We're not talking about what we saw last for Sam Howell. This is actually a pretty decent quarterback. I'm
talking about the average depth of target, the average depth, the average yards per target and per reception of number 1 wide receivers under Cliff Kingsbury and Cliff Kingsbury's pro style offense is not a whole lot different than what we saw out of McLaurin last season. And that was by far the lowest numbers in those 2 categories of McLaurin's career. I don't think it's anything to do with the fact that Daniels can't throw the ball or won't throw the ball. And maybe because he does have a guy that can throw the deep ball, Kingsbury dials things up a little farther down the field this year. I think it'd be great. I think it'd be fun as all hell to watch, because I think that Terry McLaurin does have more to offer us, on the field, because he has the potential to be playing with a better quarterback now. And I would really like to see, Jayden Daniels succeed. I'm just not going to count on it this season yet. Dan wants to know, Adam, why you're the highest of all of us on Malik Neighbors at 24.
Yeah, I think he is going to be the identity of this offense. I've talked before about guys who I think like this offense is this guy, and I think that's what the Giants offense is going to be. we know that, their coaching staff loves slot receivers. We know Daniel Jones loves slot receivers. And we know that there's not a whole lot else kind of going on here. We talk about, just freakish targets. I think he's going to have like one of the craziest target percentages we've seen out of a rookie quarter or wide receiver in a while. And we've seen some pretty crazy rookie seasons. Now, granted, Puka had Kupp, Jamar had T already. Like, these guys that have had these crazy rookie seasons have had other guys around them, Thielen and Justin Jefferson as well. But man, I just think from a target perspective, at some point, like even if it's completely inefficient because the quarterback sucks, because the team sucks, at some point the targets just have to matter. But Adam, I think he's going to break 150.
Real quick, do you think, looking at like Drake London last year, Deontay Johnson at Pittsburgh, the quarterback, not being good, can it really hold down some of these guys, even if you're supposed to get that target share?
I think he's better after the catch than Deontay, which I do think is the better comparison. I don't think Drake London is someone who, can do is in that same archetype where the targets are going to matter as much. I need Drake London to get in the end zone. I don't necessarily need my PPR type guys to get in the end zone as much. My Deontay's, my neighbors. And Dan, I don't hate the under on receiving touchdowns because we all know Daniel Jones isn't breaking 20. I can tell you that right now. He's probably like, if he hits 15, we're all excited about Daniel Jones. But again, I just think, especially like in a half-point PPR, full-point PPR, and standard, he's probably worth nothing. But Neighbors is going to get enough targets that I'm willing to talk about him in the low-end wide receiver 2 to the high-end wide receiver 3 category.
Do they run him at X or do they put him in the slot? I know they have 800 other slot receivers. Do they run him in the slot or because he's good after the catch, or do they run him at the X?
I think at the very least he's moving between all of them. I think he will take the bulk of his snaps between the slot and flank. I'm sure he will play some X. I think they're going to move him around, but I think that he's going to do a really good job as the slot.
Quick hitters real quick. Jahan Dotson, Luke McCaffrey, who becomes a wide receiver 2 for the Washington Commanders, and what kind of fantasy value do you expect them to have? I'll go first real quick. I think it's Dotson. I think he's a wide receiver 5. Go ahead, Chris. Dotson.
Yeah, other two, I would go Dotson.
I'm going to go Dotson for the bulk of the season. I could see McCaffrey getting into that job towards the end of the season, but I don't think functionally it matters for fantasy outside of like deep benches and dynasty.
Right. I'm not worried. I'm not necessarily targeting either one of these dudes, best ball, redraft, or otherwise. Down in Dallas, Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert, same question. Who becomes the wide receiver 2 for that team? What kind of fantasy value do they have? Again, I'm going with Cooks. I'm going with the incumbent, the guy who has held that number 2 position for them for the last year. I like Jalen Tolbert longer term, possibly, but I think Cooks holds on to it, and I think he's a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 type. I have him ranked at 55 right now. Adam, we'll go to you next. Cooks or Tolbert?
Not only do I think it's Cooks, I would not be shocked if, quote unquote, someone from the field passes Tolbert. I don't think Tolbert's very good, and I haven't seen any inclination from Dallas that they're like in love with the development of Tolbert.
Not even the fact that Brandon Cooks was talking his ass up last week, saying he thought Jalen Tolbert looked ready to go.
Hey, that's training camp for you.
Dan says, shut your mouth at him. All right, Chris, how about you? Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert, who ends up the wide receiver 2, and where are they at?
I think it's Brandon Cooks, and it doesn't matter.
I agree with that sentiment, by the way.
All right. Then let's wrap this up quickly before we push too far past the hour mark here. The tight end position here in this division, interesting situation. We've got couple of guys that are pretty universally ranked as starting options. And then we've got a couple of wide ass open question marks here. Jake Ferguson, we all have, I think, ranked as the top guy in the division there. Coming off a phenomenal season last year, kind of a breakout season, as it were, for him. We know that Dallas likes their tight ends. They always seem to try and use their tight ends. And it seems like they've got their next one here in Jake Ferguson. He ended up last season as the tight end 9 overall, only 5 receiving touchdowns, but saw over 100 targets. He was one of a handful of guys that saw over 100 targets there at the tight end position. I think you can expect the same kind of thing for him there. But Adam, you've got him ranked at number 11. Chris, you've got him ranked at number 5. So real quick here, give us
You two are both on mute, by the way.
Oh, excellent. Well, now I've been unmuted because thank you to our behind the scenes producer there behind the glass for getting me unmuted here. But we've got a showdown here now. Chris, you're the one, you have him been ranked at number 5. You've got Ferguson ranked all the way up at number 5. You're kind of the farthest out of whack of all of us. Dan's got him at 9. I've got him at 8. Adam, you've got him all the way down at 11. So like I said, we've all got him kind of as a tight end 1. Chris, why do you have him at tight end 5? Why are you so excited about some Jake Ferguson this season?
Well, kind of what I said, Chase, why I didn't care about the receiver 2 option question was because I think the receiver 2 is clearly the picture is the tight end position in this offense. That's who we've seen Dak Prescott always look for. We saw Dalton Schultz become his best friend previous. It's not about the talent per se. People keep talking about Jake Ferguson, something special talent-wise. Same thing with Dalton Schultz, but it matters who the quarterback likes to throw the ball to. It also matters who the guy at the coordinator can scheme for. With CeeDee Lamb being that kind of chess piece, it allows a lot of things Justin Ferguson to be kind of a secondary read. And you see a guy who he looked for in the red zone quite often. Had twice as many touchdown catches last year as Dalton Kincaid. Just want to point that out. So put all those things together, looking at a guy who has his first good year last year, tight end position, usually the third year is the breakout, had to break out the second year. Guy's going to be his third year in his offense, a guy who's the second priority in his offense, who's going to put 30 points on the board week in, week out. A team that we have questions about the running attack, but we have no questions about the passing attack. So I want a piece of that, and I think Jake Ferguson is one of the safest pieces I can have. So that's why I have him on the top 5 receiver, or top 5 tight end option.
All right, Adam, your rebuttal.
I don't have a great argument. For me, it's just look. I'm gonna be honest. I how you feel about Hooper is how I feel about Ferguson. I think in the top 16 tight ends, I really strongly feel he's the least talented player. Like straight up, I don't think he's that good of a tight end. At least in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, in the Chase, as you like to say, in the population, he's a great football player. I don't.
Right.
I just at fantasy football, like, do I genuinely think he's of the 12 most talented tight ends? No. 16? Probably not. Like, that's when the conversation starts. But kind of what I was saying with Neighbors, at a certain point, yeah, I agree. Like, if the quarterback's going to throw to him as much as, it's been happening, then he's going to have value. And that's why I had him. It was a low-end starter. I think he's a starter. I think you draft him, you feel good about the starters. But I think tight end position is at a really good spot right now where there are 14 guys this season that have a case to be made that they can be starting type tight ends. So for me, like when I'm looking at it, I'm going to gamble on the guys that I think are more talented because I feel more secure, that their jobs are safe, that, because realistically, do I think one of the Dallas tight end backups could come in and, do 80% of Ferguson? Like if he got hurt, I'm not saying anyone's passing him on the depth chart. Let's be clear, but like, I don't think he is much above replacement is the point that I'm getting to. So for me, like, I'm just going to bet on the better talents that I see. So
okay.
I think he's a starter because of volume, but that's it.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you don't think he's quite the generational talent that say Jermichael Finley was. Yeah, right? Like you just think he's a dude. He's a dude.
Finley was a much better tight end.
He's a dude in a good situation is what you're saying. And anybody else who is a dude could probably fill in and hit that. I don't think I agree with that quite so much. I think that he is a good fit in this offense. And I think he's a better fit than a lot of other guys would be. I don't think he's one of the lesser talented guys in the top 16. But then again, he's a Wisconsin guy. I'm probably looking at through cardinal colored glasses there, because of it. But okay. Well, I mean, you still have him ranked, like you said. You still have him ranked as a tight end 1. It's a good dilemma to have there. Dallas Goedert, we kind of all have ranked as the second best tight end option in this division. He's kind of, listen, here's my take on Goedert. I don't think anybody necessarily disagrees. You've got the new coordinator in Kellen Moore there in Philadelphia, but I'm not worried about that because the way I see Dallas Goedert is he's somewhere between Dalton Schultz, who was tight end 9 under Kellen Moore in 2022, and Gerald Everett, who was tight end 22 under Kellen Moore in 2023. So I'm not worried about the Kellen Moore factor there. You know what you're going to get with Dallas Goedert. You're going to get 10 points per game, roughly, and you're going to get 4 touchdowns this season, and he's going to be a low tight end 1, and he's going to have no real upside. I don't necessarily want to target him in best ball because he's not really going to have those spike weeks. He's just going to kind of keep moving on. He's gonna show up. He's gonna get you his floor. He's not gonna get you a whole hell of a lot more than that, and his ceiling is not overly high. He's safe. Dallas Goedert is not going to win you your league. And by the way, he hasn't seen over 9 targets in a game since 2020. So, I mean, he's going to be a steady dude. He's going to be a presence, but he's not necessarily going to do anything for you that's exciting. Okay, so I'm not worried about Dallas Goedert from that standpoint. He's a low-end tight end 1. Deal with it. But there's a couple of questions of the other 2 teams in this division real quick. To finish up here, in Washington, Ben Sinnott, Zach Ertz. Does Sinnott profile for either one of you guys as a possibly fantasy relevant rookie tight end? Chris, go.
I want to say yes, Chase, because I know how Kingsbury loves to use the tight end position. Is also offense is going to use 2 tight ends quite often in their offense. We saw that kind of conversion towards the end of his career in Arizona. We saw that continue on in USC. It's something we're hearing a lot out of camp for Washington so far. So I think the usage is going to be that you've seen the receivers, Zach Ertz kind of resurgence when he got traded to Arizona after having his career basically dying in Philadelphia. So I want to say yes, but I talk about just a dude to me. Ben Sinnott is just a dude to me. I think is a guy I have not very excited about when it comes to his talent. And a guy who I think is going to make Zach Ertz go away. So both those things I think is a guy that might have some spike weeks maybe towards the end of the season. You like having him because he's maybe taking the position over. But overall, isn't a guy that either one of these guys I really want to have.
Adam, your take on it, Sinnott versus Ertz.
If you were being a cheapo at tight end and you want to gamble, I don't necessarily hate Ertz because I do think there's upside based on potential volume. I think that there's a world in which Ertz is the check down guy rather than Ekeler. But am I necessarily like betting on that in like a over 50% type of thing? Not really. But hey, if in the last round of your draft, you want to throw a dart on a tight end because, you either drafted years late, like sure, go for it.
Chris's point about Ben Sinnott being just a guy is everything that I said about him all through the process of the draft. I said that, listen, he looks like he's not quite the pass catcher that a lot of these other dudes are. He's not the blocker that, say, George Kittle is. He's not the runner that, say, Kyle Juszczyk. He's kind of like, is he a fullback that kind of pushes out wide a little bit? Is he a tight end? Is he a move guy? Is he not? He's just kind of a dude. He's nothing special. He's no generational talent like Finley. Here's the thing that happened last time Cliff Kingsbury paired Zach Ertz with a supposedly talented rookie tight end. It was Ertz and Trey McBride, and Ertz had that job until he got hurt late in the season, and then McBride took over. I think that's exactly what you see here, because I think what you're going to want to do with a rookie quarterback is have the guy in Zach Ertz who knows the offense, knows where he's supposed to be, and is going to be there, much like I said last year with Adam Thielen for Bryce Young, being that safety blanket veteran who you can count on to be in the right position. I think that's Zach Ertz, especially first half of the season. So yeah, if I'm trying to gamble on one of the guys, maybe Zach Ertz, just because I think he gets that first half of the season usage. I don't want either one of them necessarily this season. Sinnott might end up being relevant long-term, but I'm just not overly excited about him because I don't think he's Jermichael Finley. Now, moving on to New York real quick. Last topic we'll talk about real quick. Theo Johnson or Daniel Bellinger. We've got the rumors that Waller supposedly is retiring, and Kelsey Plum is probably happy to hear that. So who ends up being the guy in New York, and do we care? Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger. Adam, we'll start with you.
Bellinger will see more snaps. Theo Johnson will see more targets. Neither of them will matter in any capacity.
Chris.
I think Theo Johnson by far, I think there's a chance he has some kind of value down the road because I think there's very few red zone targets in this Giants offense.
To get all 15 passing touchdowns?
Okay, you could catch half of them, Adam. You could catch half of them. So
if he's the red zone dude.
And I think that we know Darren Waller was going to be the feature part of this offense. We know Daniel Jones is going to attack the middle of the field. That's the only things he can really do. And everything coming out of camp, Theo Johnson heavily evolved their passing attack, one of the more guys that they're kind of primarily focusing a lot of usage with. So I think we saw Dawson Knox have kind of a decent year when Brian Gable was still there as a touchdown catcher in the red zone particularly. I think that's where you get these Theo Johnson have similar value.
Daniel Bellinger, I mean, he had it rough. His rookie season, didn't he shatter his orbital bone? Like his eye socket literally or something, like he missed a bunch of time there, and it cost him in his rookie season. I think Bellinger ends up being more of the down in, down out tight end for this team. But kind of to the point that Adam made a little bit, and a point that I made in the draft process, I thought Theo Johnson could have an immediate red zone opportunity in whatever team he was drafted to, because he is a willing blocker and a big dude. He's still 6 foot, 7 foot almost, and I thought he could have red zone opportunities be as a target. So I think Bellinger is more the starter. I think Theo Johnson could see more value in the red zone. And like you said, when the targets in the red zone are going to be few and far between for this team, and the passes are not going to come fast and furious, a guy who has red zone value on this team could be the more valuable of the two. I'm not excited about either one of them at this point in their careers, though. Dan, down there reminding us, if you check the comments, check the comment stream here on this podcast here, Dan's got all kinds of bets here, future bets for you to check out there.
Well, go ahead.
I
was going to say, Chase, go ahead. He's giving us our underdog special for today's show. And, we always want you to go check out underdog. But he has Jayden Daniels over 500.5 rushing yards is his underdog special tonight. For the past 2 years in college, he had over 1,000 last year. Kingsbury is running a similar offense he used for Kyler. So that's Dan's underdog bet of the night for our special. Looking for 500.5 yards over for Jayden Daniels.
I think Jayden Daniels is a better rusher than Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray had 544 yards rushing his rookie season under Cliff Kingsbury there. We will be back on Thursday night, as Dan's put up down there, next week, Thursday night. Keep in mind, not Wednesday night, Thursday night next week at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We're gonna have special guest Bob Long. He of the Consistency Report fame, and of course the Fantasy Football Expo down there. We're going to be talking the AFC North next week. Check out Fantasy Football Advice Network for articles from Dan and plenty of other guys, and you can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts there. Find us on social media there. Give it a follow, and hey, sign up on Underdog. Use that promo code Fantasy Football Advice. Get yourself a discount there, and give us a hand here. Thank you for putting up with all of the technical difficulties.
It's a process.
It's a work in process, as Adam likes to say. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We will be back next Thursday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Find us on social media, and we are out of here.
Hey there, I'm proud to say that Underdog Fantasy is the newest sponsor of our show, and it's my favorite place to play fantasy games. No waivers, no trades, no lineup settings, just best ball for season-long drafters all year long. And you gotta check out Pick'em. It's so easy to play. Just pick 2 to 5 stats of your favorite players. You can choose whether they go higher or lower on those stats, and if you can pick 5 in a row, you can win 20 times your money. Sound like fun? Well, guess what? You can sign up with promo code FFAdvice today to claim your special pick, plus a first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. I cannot wait to see your entries.